such a fatuous remark, you know. I mean, that was one of the early capitalist industries. Was well, you know, like they said on that great comedy show, Mr. Show. You know, people selling people to people. Like that's one of the first industries that there is. And without all that free labor, there's no cotton boom. And people don't realize, look, like cotton, big deal. I don't wear cotton. Like cotton was the oil of that time, you know, like the whole industrialization of the northern part of the country, where we look down on the South, you know, because we have capitalism here instead of that early slave plantation economy. It was that super low cost cotton, thanks to not having to pay your workforce anything, because you enslaved them and you own their children and can sell them if you want. Like, that's why that feed resource was so cheap. That's a big part of why the country is rich to this day. You know? So yeah, that's amazing to me. But also it's kind of goofy. When I was talking to him, like you talk to these Ayn Rand libertarians, and they say, oh, you know, the government's, you know, America's not capitalist, so we can blame our problems on the parts that aren't capitalist rather than the reality, which is that we're very capitalist here, you know. And just because these words become empty, you know, capitalism is where, you know, you got an economic system based on markets, you know, where supply and demand in markets decide how much we're going to make of different products, and where you have private property on a large scale. So not just like your personal pair of pants and your smartphone or your private property, but also like I can own all the land in a, you know, you can be like Larry Ellison, who's a Washingtonian like me, who bought the island of Lanai, one of the Hawaiian islands. That's his island, and he bought it. This was like in 2005 or something, you know, it's a little while back there. That's interesting. You can own all the telecommunications wires in a region that bring the internet to you. You can own the oil refineries that let us have energy. Like, that's capitalism. And so the fact that we have like Social Security and Medicare so that old people can get health care even if their pension doesn't cover it, like, that's not enough to make it socialist, Mr. Brooke. I'm very sorry. So these guys have been ducking out of recognizing capitalism's problems by pegging them on the fact that government exists at all. The fact is, it's existing on top of a capitalist system, and it's kind of a cheap evasion, you know. And plus, these guys talk like Reagan never happened. You know, ever since the Reagan Revolution, you know, since it's the neoliberal period, and we've been hacking away at the EPA, hacking away at taxes on the rich, you know, cutting labor law enforcement. The unions have been pretty crushed. Those aren't small changes, and they're all changes that move us closer to that pure capitalism of the Gilded Age, you know, the late 1800s that I was trying to get him to think about for a second. So to me, it just shows, like, you know, these guys, they have a lot of intellectual pretensions, and some of them have degrees, and they get a lot of Koch brother, you know, dark money, whose, you know, sources we can't really see. So they can be very prominent, but they're total intellectual opportunists as soon as you dig under the surface of it.
To hear the rest of this show and more. All right. That was a clip that I did from an interview I had a while back with Professor Rob Larson, who wrote Capitalism versus Freedom. That's on Zero Books, where also you can catch this show every Wednesday. And that's going to be part of the discussion today, because for those of you that know, my Facebook account was totally deleted by Facebook for violating community standards. I wasn't given a warning. There was no email. I literally just woke up and my Facebook was deleted. Being that I don't try to violate community standards and say foul shit and threaten people and all the other things that would violate community standards, I didn't back up a lot of pictures. And a lot of those pictures I've had for a few years, there were pictures of pictures, so that I don't have anymore. And I definitely lost a lot of pictures of my kids and touring memories and things like that. But I will digress. Pascal Robert, my co-host, my brother.
Yes. How are you living?
I'm living a little angry.
Facebook censoring and causing all kinds of consternation to our podcast endeavor.
Yeah.
Very disconcerting. Not happy.
Even starting up this show was a whole to do, because we were disconnected from all of our usual streaming accounts. And also to come in and vent with us is a very good friend, and I'm sometimes his bandmate, with his project, Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. You also may know him from his extremely successful podcast, Protonic Reversal, which is definitely more a music show than it is a political show. But much like when we get to have Dan Larson on here that gets to talk about politics, Conan gets to come on here and talk about politics. Conan Neutron.
Peace and greetings to Conan Neutron.
Thank you so much.
Lighting looks better now in the room. It looks less conspiratorial now.
Having an audio issue here. Let me
Can you hear us? Uh-oh. He's fixing his audio.
Did he go black on us? That sounds like that was a total
Yeah, he said, "You jive turkeys, I'm gone."
You jive, Sober number one.
You two jive turkeys.
That was such a pun. That was not intentional, man.
Okay, I suddenly got nothing. I got nothing on audio. I don't know.
You can't hear anything anymore? Can you hear us? Conan.
Can't hear us.
Uh-oh.
What is going on?
We're gonna fix that. So Pascal, what is your opinion about big tech and the way they're able to censor? And let's get it. There's a conversation right now because Donald Trump has been removed from Twitter and Facebook because of what happened on the 6th at the Capitol.
Right.
Insurrection, pushed, whatever you want to call it, coup. I don't care what you call it. Something very bad happened. People died at the Capitol. People feel that Donald Trump was at the center of it with what he says on the internet. So he finally gets kicked off these social media platforms. And now there's news coming down of bigger threats on Inauguration Day. And more people, Facebook and Twitter are cracking down on a lot of what people are saying. So I wrote an essay, not even about any of the Capitol shit. It was literally about the way we treat poor people, but I used the title of a Dead Kennedy song called Kill the Poor. And it was enough to get not me in Facebook jail, as people say, not banned. They totally deleted my entire account. Gone. So what's your take on big tech being able to do stuff like that, Pascal?
My sentiments when it comes to this type of activities to realize, like, what are the legal precedents that they usually use in this endeavor, and the argument that they usually use is that these are private corporations. When you sign up to use these private corporations, you sign on with their quote-unquote terms and agreements, and that because you sign on with their terms and agreements, you are simply using their product, and they get to dictate how their product is regulated, and if you violate certain terms, they can delete you or remove you or suspend you on their terms. I think that when you have platforms that are shaping political discourse, allegedly influencing direction in elections, actually giving access to certain types of political speech that gives candidates or movements or whole various social phenomenon in countries advantages to advance their particular movement. I think that the idea that these are just private corporations that are adhering to their own kind of regulations and we should follow them is ridiculous. When the Arab Spring was happening and people were saying, "Oh, this wonderful revolutionary thing is happening on Facebook. This is amazing. This is wonderful." I didn't hear people talking about, well, this is a private corporation and we have the right to censor these people if we want to, if we don't like their terms of agreement or their content. At that time, Facebook was heralded as some kind of arbiter of freedom, liberty, and democracy in the world because they were platforming these young revolutionaries in the Muslim world, seeking to be liberated from their powerful totalitarian leaders. But yet now that same company those same companies that were thought to be forces of revolutionary transformation are telling you that if you don't toe the line with a certain political worldview, that they will shut you down. Now, I am not one who has affection for fascist speech or racist speech or hate speech. And I don't think that there should be, a quote unquote protection for hate speech. But I'm also one who realizes that if you just try to silence right-wing voices, thinking that your ideologies or your opinions are pure, then you don't know the history of how that type of politics traditionally has been used to silence people with politics like myself. And usually in the past, it's more people with politics like us who challenge capitalism, imperialism, racism, and sexism who get the hammer of censorship than the right wingers. So I don't know, I had someone who was a good friend of mine. She was like, I don't believe in the bourgeois notion of First Amendment rights when it's protecting fascists. And I was like, how can we on the left look at the history of how First Amendment or freedom of speech was used by workers to advance labor rights, economic justice that was outside the line of thought in this capitalist society as being completely beyond the pale? And how can we be the ones making arguments that freedom of speech is a bourgeois right, that we should not be licensing its use for those we find reactionary? When it is freedom of speech that allows our ideas, which many people find out of the public norm, to get a platform. I will love to hear what our co-host, our guest, has to say. I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. If I may, well, first of all, what's the Ice-T quote? Freedom of speech, just watch what you say. The very quotable Ice-T. I think there's also a big thing that we need to look at now is, are these social media platforms private corporations with terms of services, as Pascal was talking about? Are we considering them private enterprise that are above any kind of government regulation, or are they a public square? That's the question. At what point does something like a Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever go beyond being a tool for whatever purposes as a for-profit entity, or even nonprofit, I suppose, would be possible? And when does it actually cross over into being media? Now, even when it comes to media, it's been a long time since we had the Fairness Act, right? And I don't necessarily think that the Fairness Act would be even applicable or possible to deal with now. But the main question right now is, you have a lot of these platforms, especially Twitter, has been incredibly lax on moderation, or just non-existent on moderation of any kind. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, conditionally, when the tide shifted and it advantaged them, then suddenly they're all about moderation. Okay, well, I think if you either need to make a set of rules, meaning regulation, and have people abide by it, or you're going to get this 15 different answers to the same question type of thing. And without any consistency, how you're just going to piss off everybody. And I personally feel that I'm a big believer in freedom of speech. Like the idea that freedom of speech, but freedom of speech with consequence. Like you're not protected. You have your freedom of speech protected, but you don't have freedom from consequence.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, the shouting fire in a movie theater is the actually, I think it was just a theater when that adage came out, meaning I'm gonna go see a play. Oh, watch out,
Fire.
Mr. Lincoln. Yeah,
Fire.
Oh dear, there's a fire. Everyone's gonna leave. But the idea being that public harm, right? So if somebody, and I would apply that to my friends that lean anarchist and whatnot, that if you're when you're talking about, hey, let's go burn the police station down, which first of all, that's not really a premeditated action, but let's just say for the sake of this argument that is, that's incitement to violence. And that, if we don't apply that same thing to people planning an armed insurrection and lame coup, right, then it's not consistent, and there is no consistency. Now, I'm not saying that more regulation is the answer, but hey, if the market's going to provide, the market better provide, right? It's not. Right now, it's providing a bunch of different solutions that seem to have shifting drunk dad logic. So that's my take on that. And I can't stand, again, I don't want to see Nazis spouting off in any way, shape, or form. But anytime, if some idiot wants to mouth off on Facebook or Twitter or whatnot, they should be allowed to, but they're not going to be. They shouldn't be free from having other people take them down and question their beliefs. And there should be a discussion. The other thing, though, is I don't think that more discussion is the answer. I think that a lot of times, what is phrased as discussion ends up just being people kind of doing their talking points at each other.
Yeah.
And that's a problem too. But that's a larger problem. That's to do, Jason. Remember last time we talked about the frame-based reality and the fact that there's been this, 30, 40 year push towards people just to be in their own realm where they're surrounded by other people that believe exactly what they believe.
Yeah.
And this is the end result of that. It's what's that meme? Oh no, it's the consequences of my actions. Mm-hmm. Come back to haunt me. That's what we're dealing with. We're all dealing with that right now. And I'm not saying I got a solution for it right now, but I can tell you damn sure that we are not addressing the problem.
What I'm afraid of happened, and I'll be honest with everybody that's paying attention to this right now. After it happened, I was shook because number one, I knew I had lost some things that I couldn't get back. Number two, I was scared that I lost the show. And number three, I was scared that this platform had become so large that it affected my life to that point.
Right, because you got all your eggs in the one basket, right?
I had all my eggs into one social media basket. And if you think about this, 10, 15 years ago, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal if your MySpace account went down. You'd be like, oh, that sucks.
I got to rebuild my top 8.
Yeah. But you would have, right? We would have gone on and done whatever it was that we did. Sure. We were still meeting a lot more in public. We were still handing out flyers to our shows and putting up posters and all the things that you used to do back in the day to get the word out. And it's just a different environment now when it comes to that kind of stuff. And when I saw that everything had got erased, I was like, should I say something? That never crosses my mind when I decide to do a show, when I decide to write an essay. I never think first, what's going to happen if I say that this is me? Because a lot of people were sending me personal messages like, is this Jason Miles? Because it says Jason Miles, but what is this? And luckily I had this, Cindy and I had kept a profile of the band. And I was able to just change the name. So I got to change some of those photos before I get but
understood.
It scared me because it's like our good friend Mike Cobra, who, thank you for helping me get all this back together, Mike. His wife had said the worst censorship is self-censorship to me.
You're onto something real important there, because the idea is that you get to the point that the system has you so trained that they don't even have to censor you. You just be like, well, I don't even want to deal with it.
Yeah, no, Riverman, you are glad you left Facebook, because this is some silly bullshit that I feel like I have to deal with. Because go ahead, Pascal.
In real terms, right? How can we argue that Facebook is just a private company that should be regulated by its terms and of services, when now something like over 53% of Americans get their initial news from Facebook?
Yeah.
Facebook is a place where people are actually having more serious political dialogue than in spaces where they're meeting in person. I mean, the notion that this is just a website that people check in on and that Facebook doesn't have a political consequence doesn't bear out in terms of the actual research we have on the actual website in terms of how it works already. So that being said, the debate should not be whether or not Facebook is just a website. It's just a URL. We know it's not just a URL, and we know that they don't want to be just a URL.
Right, exactly. They've worked to become a news source. They've worked to become a public square. So the answer, is it private corporation or is it public square? Well, look at it this way. When Facebook said, we're not going to allow political advertising for like a certain duration of time, that literally affected 2 elections. And it affected, ultimately, that could be a whole show in and of itself as to what the effects of that were. But why would that be? Because advertising on Facebook, when you have certain people that, again, well, I don't watch cable news, I don't whatever. It's like, yeah, but you're on Facebook, like looking at memes from like your conspiracy theorist uncle, right? I mean, like, like somehow like that's better. Like that's like some, it's because it's not regulated doesn't mean it's better. It just means it's unregulated. and I, it used to be in days of yore, I'd be like, well, I don't know if regulation's the answer on that, but look at what they're doing with it. There's an old saying, right? That if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Wow. I like that saying. I really like that.
And that's exactly what has happened with Facebook is that, your content, your personality, your opinions, your thoughts, all your likes, what you like to buy, what you buy on Amazon, the websites that you like to search for on Google are all in an algorithm that they sell to corporations for advertising.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the most odious things, and I meant to comment on earlier, Jason, with your situation, was the fact that not only did they do this thing to you where, as you mentioned, you lost tour pictures, you lost your contacts, you lost information that like is irrevocably changed your life.
Yeah.
And there's no possibility for appeal? Are you kidding me? Like, first of all, like, okay, if we're talking, let's just put libertarian hats on, right? I guess it'd be a bowler, a bowler hat. No, sorry, not bowler, a fedora. My bad, wrong hat. So let's put our fedoras on and be like, all right, the market's going to provide. Well, if there was an alternative that had like a 60-70% market share of like news, advertising, et cetera, and they had an appeal to like, hey man, somebody narked me out, to use my dad's term, and my account got deleted. Can I have a human review this? And if like MeWe says yes and Facebook says no, that makes MeWe the better alternative.
Yeah.
But that said, it's a false dichotomy because they're like Microsoft or like one of these things that are such a monopoly on everything that it's more just kind of like an academic exercise to even like talk about that. There is no competition. Who's Facebook's competition? There isn't any.
There isn't any.
And there can't be right now because they've been very smart as a corporate entity And when something's come up that's challenged them, they've absorbed those features into their thing, like the Borg for the Star Trek fans out there, right? They just have absorbed these other like races of people across these different planets and made them into more Borg. Snapchat and
the stories,
the stories, right? And like I forgot what the features what they stole from Google Plus, but Google Plus looked like, oh well, they might be able to do it, even though it's Google, and it's like, oh nope, absorbed by the Borg. So what I'm driving at with all that is that there is no competitor to Facebook, and when you talk about this idea, and we can talk about the efficacy of capitalism and all that, but for folks that believe in like market solutions and a regulated free market, it's not good to have one company do everything. AT&T, even when we talk about AT&T, we think of like, okay, cell phones and internet and like Uverse and cable and whatnot. They're doing all these things. What a lot of people don't know, AT&T owns the lines. The physical lines that move the internet across this entire country. They lease these lines to the other providers. The only reason they have to do that is because of some legislation that was passed years ago that basically said like, hey, you can't do that. If you own every part of the infrastructure, then you are the definition of monopoly and we'll have to break you up. So they did just enough. To get past that, which is to say, well, we're going to let all these fools like run on our stuff. We're just going to charge them like a nominal fee. So it works out for them because they don't get broken up, but they get more money. And that's what they're all about at the end of the day, right? Like if there wasn't a reward for them to do it, then they wouldn't do it. And for numerous reasons, we're in a situation right now, but where people just kind of look past that. And it's like, well, so it's been interesting to see right-wingers awakening to the fact that there are these like unaccountable private corporations that are controlling large aspects of culture. Now, because it affects them. That is the only reason it affects them. And suddenly they give a damn.
And what's even more interesting is watching those same right-wingers call for state-sponsored response.
Right? Now you like government, huh? You like
government now because you can't, watch, whatever your favorite, social media YouTube video is.
Watch Dave Rubin videos.
I took great pleasure in a conversation like that, just responding back, the market will provide. that made me so happy to just in a way that's it's a little small, sure, but I was just like, yeah, how's it feel? You like that?
Somebody says they wonder if I don't know if Chance Campbell says, I wonder if smaller, more decentralized social network options will become more widely utilized. I'm not sure if it would be entirely better, but maybe there's something there. I think the problem is it's hard to get people off suckling the large teat of a thing like Facebook, because like Conan said, I had amassed so many contacts from touring for 7, 8, 10 years, and I don't have any of those contacts. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head the promoter from that little venue I played in Dundee, Scotland. Yeah,
you got that? Remember that guy's name? Yeah.
I mean, like, that's to lose all that stuff is hard, and to gain all that, to do it with these small networks, it's really hard, because people also too are not so quick to get with the new thing. Like what you guys are saying about Facebook swallowing up all its competitors and then absorbing those features into its own. Had I not been there and seen it for my own two eyes, them talking about that in meetings where I had to sign NDSs and talking about even the rollout of what live streaming was going to do, and it had nothing to do with you being more you live. It was about selling products, using live streaming to sell products.
That's it. So that's just it. Like the idea that the right wingers have is that suddenly they want to cramp down on our speech. They don't like our worldview. they don't give a damn about your worldview. They're looking to sell ads, and they're looking to mine data, and they mine that data. It doesn't matter to them. It's widgets. It's just widgets. That's all it is. And the idea that that all these folks that are coming up are kind of entering the like mindset I was at like 2003, where it's like, welcome to the party, pal. Like, where I'm sorry, where have you been? That like you didn't notice any of this stuff was happening. And so there's a couple things you addressed I kind of want to get to real quick, and I want to answer that listener question. One of which is that I think the idea of like there being these smaller entities that could fill the gaps or become alternatives. There's a break point where enough people have to join it to have that be worthwhile. There have to be enough people that do like a Facebook Brexit. You know, I was trying to think of some clever term for it, but I got nothing, man. That they all move en masse to something else, and the fact of the matter is, because Facebook has made it such an integral part of everyone's life. My dad, like, I mean, he's on Facebook 24/7, 365. You know, and he's just like, you know, sharing memes. You know, like commenting on my like
frog memes.
Yeah, no. He's an old he's an old school labor guy. So it's like every once in a while one of his old union buddies that took a hard right turn will like mouth off and whatever. But it's more like inappropriate. I mean, he follows like all my female musician friends who are hot and like, you know, interacts with them. I'm like, man, Dad, come on. Like, I get it, but it's like, wow. Like, he's not inappropriate or anything, but it's just like, man, like, why are you so busy on the internet, dude?
Well, son, you got this hot friend.
But then it's also like, you know, there's people that are in other bands. They're like, hey, your dad's awesome. It's like, yeah, he's busy on the internet.
I like your dad.
No, my dad's cool as hell, and every once in a while, just because he's surrounded by a bunch of like Fox News watching idiots, like. He'll come in with some sort of like take on something that I'm like, yeah, man, that kind of sucks. Here's why I think why. And it's always back, you know, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. But that's my dad. My dad's got critical thinking skills, right? He's a very smart fella. Like a lot of his buddies that he interacts with, it's a bunch of knuckleheads. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive, but they're.
Shout out to Michael Markowski, Conan and I's mutual friend that now stays in the islands. Shout out to Michael Markowski.
Yeah, Michael's seen this. My dad's real busy. he loves memes too, man. That fool loves memes. He's all about the memes. The more the better.
Luckily, my father is not a social media guy. I'm very happy for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, good for you. That's awesome. So what I was driving at with all that though is that there needs to be a break point for there to be an alternative. Like there has to be enough people to move over to it for it to happen. And I think that there's just so many things that are with Facebook, and let's not forget that inertia is a big part of this. Like Facebook's stated goal was to be like the landing page of the internet, and people don't even think about that term anymore because it used to be a term that like. Yahoo wants to be like the Yahoo portal. Y'all remember that? Like, we want to be like the first place you go to on the internet. I'm like, well, didn't really work out for you, did it, son? But Facebook is where people go to first before a lot of things. And I'm not saying like, you know, then there's always the people that are the quick to chime in. Well, I don't watch television. You know, I don't go to Facebook first. Okay, we get it. We get it. You're better than everyone. Can you pipe down, please? But it's the landing page of the internet. So like certain things can emulate certain features and provide that value and that messaging, but none of them are going to be able to do all the things that Facebook does, largely because of inertia, largely because of their business model, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea that has been baked into the concept from the beginning, and they're very good at it.
What did you think about the capacity for Parler to challenge Facebook at one point? I think the problem that Parler had was that it was unidimensional ideologically, and that it was kind of what I call the resent site, in that was a site that was birthed in resentment to the way in which it felt Trump's supporters were treated. And because of that, I only felt that it would only have a certain fixed marketability in terms of internet platforms overall. But it did grow. It did have a growth spurt.
It did, and I think that's a great point, Pascal. I think that I think you're going to have limited efficacy for anything that is a reaction to something. And the reason why is because people are hot. Oh, we're being censored on Twitter. We're being censored on Facebook. We need a place where we can, talk about our QAnon conspiracies in peace. All right, well, then you can do that over here. The thing that I love about Parler, man, this is so amazing to me. You had to give all kinds of personal information to them. You had to give all this personal information that I think I'd upload an ID or something along those lines. I was like, wait a minute, man. Aren't you concerned about your information being in the hands of others? I thought that was your raison d'etre for this armed insurrection. But okay, but they're letting us rant about Comet Ping Pong over here. Okay, well, if that's more important to you, but people get so worked up. And there's actually, I think it was Glenn Greenwald, who actually has a pretty good point. And I find him interesting and annoying sometimes in the same paragraph. But he brought up a really good point that when you take away people's ability to vent, that's dangerous. And I say that, think all the way back to 2000. I didn't vote for Al Gore. I voted for Ralph Nader. And in the state of California, I didn't feel the slightest bit bad about it. Any vote shame or whatever, everyone can go take a flying fork and a rolling donut, right? But the thing is, people were pissed. I was pissed. And I remember how unfair everything felt, largely because it was unfair. But other elections have felt that same way, and I never forget that feeling. So these folks, the Trump people, the MAGA people, the QAnon people, they all feel that, but with their leader, their their cult head, however you want to put it, the
Colt 45.
Colt 45.
Colt 45.
Yeah, exactly. What was the Billy D slogan on that one? I'm trying to remember. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not quick enough. Pretend I made a cool reference. These guys have their figurehead not only not say okay, John Kerry, Al Gore, John Kerry, they both hey guys, we need to come together. We need to support the president so the country can blah, 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 blah. Immediately. Almost too soon for both those guys. Trumpy has done exactly the opposite. He's been fueling the fire, which already, there's always, high tensions because we don't get past elections anymore. Because the circuits that we've created for ourselves allow us to be surrounded by people that believe the exact same thing we do. So because of that, none of us will get past elections. Remember back when Mitt Romney ran against Obama, that was the first instance that there were people that not only were shocked that Obama won, they were shocked that Obama could have won. And that's because they were so surrounded by people that just saying the same things as they were, they believed the same things they were, they didn't even understand that there was there's something that could happen. Now, take that, times it by 2,000, and that's 2016. We have all the people with the pink pussy hat wearers that were oh, how could he have won? I'm I'm sorry, do you live in the same country I do?
I tell people that all the time, Conan. 2012, and I know you've heard me say this, and I'll keep saying it over again, was the first year I was scared to tour. Cindy and I really felt that hatred from that first Obama term in the center of the country.
I think you're onto something really important here, because when you're in a band that tours, something that's kind of a side effect of touring is you get to you see all these different areas of the country. You just don't see here the big city I live in, how people react to stuff here. You see how's that play in Wyoming? How's that playing in Iowa? Right?
Yeah.
And it's scary. Man, it's scary for me. I'm a white dude with blue eyes. You know what I mean? But you know damn well that I tour with folks that are people of color, such as yourselves, women, and it's always it's something I never used to think about, that I was like, hey, you know what? Let me be driving on this stretch.
It's funny how much when you get in a band with people that haven't been in bands with people of color or women or
black people.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Let's just be real. Yeah. Because the cop was, damn. We would get pulled over so much, but that's a different conversation.
Well, yeah, of course, right? Because what are these two up to?
I have done a whole 2.
It's a different show. Yeah, exactly. That's a different show. I didn't mean to take us off track on.
But I don't think people understand the power, like fully understand the power. And there's a comrade that sent me an article when he saw me doing this show just now, and it happened late last year in October in Seattle, where a man was battling Apple to get the password to his murdered wife's iCloud account so he could pull some pictures out of out of her phone. And they wouldn't let him pull pictures out of his dead wife's phone.
Because they've taken on the identity of being data security absolutists, and their mindset behind that is like,
I think you can go further, of identity absolutists. In other words, they believe that they are the arbiter of the authenticity of human identity. In other words, they get to see who's a real person or not. And I think that whether or not they're there yet, I think they want to be there.
See, that's a really good point, and I think it also stems from the fact that Apple specifically, Steve Jobs, the thing that none of these, biopics, documentaries, movies, whatever, ever get on this part of it. Apple's whole thing is, you're doing it this way, you need to do it this way now. Literally telling people, like, okay, you're used to doing it like this. Now it's like this now. Use that. And that has been adopted by so many other companies and organizations that people kind of just take it for granted. Oh, we're doing this now. Okay. Whereas before it used to be like, F you. I don't want to do that. I want to do it this other way. And so their thing and it's so amazing to me that one of the first big Apple ads was like a 1984 thing.
In 1984, yeah.
Right? Because it's like, okay, you're basically doing the Big Brother thing, but you're a private corporation. But the idea of do it our way. This way's better. We're not even going to tell you why. We're just going to do it this way. That's better. So tie that with the idea that the other thing they're trying to do is, well, yeah, but we don't snitch. Basically is what it is, right? We don't want to give information when the government asks for it. We don't believe in doing that. So merge those two things together, and they think they're going through some almost like Bushido code, it's like they're like Ronins or something along those lines. But it's nothing like that. What it really is you have corporate demagoguery that comes in a friendly, trusted brand, and when you have people of control of your data and how they control that and how they use it are completely up to them without any form of regulation. You're back to the original thing, which is one of the first things that I mentioned, which is it private corporation or public square? And if it's both, do you continue to just let the market decide? Because how's that going?
Well, I'd like to really jump in here and talk about the market, because we have these folk who will say things like, I love my iPhone. This is the benefits of the technologies of capitalism that allows me to have this iPhone. This is wonderful. Shout out to Business Insider for this article. This chart shows how the U.S. military is responsible for almost all the technology in your iPhone.
The GPS, the fucking internet, DARPANet was the original name of the internet. Oh yeah. I'm with you 100% on that. People don't understand. Even Wi-Fi was publicly funded. So everything was. I believe it's every bit of important technology on here, from the touch screen. The military was trying to sell the touch screen. Rob Larson does some really great work in this, and I advise everybody to read Rob Larson has 2 books out now: Capitalism versus Freedom on Zero Books, and Bit Tyrants. It's all about big tech, and that's on Haymarket. That's his latest book. They were trying to sell this technology to IBM, and IBM wouldn't buy it. Touchscreen technology.
International business machines. Remember, I can't remember last time I was on, Jason. I can't remember if I threw down one of my favorite factoids about IBM, which is how they made their bones. Did you remember this? Was I talking about this on the show?
I don't remember. It's been a minute. You haven't been on a show like a year.
They made machines to catalog for the Nazis who were going to the camps. That's how IBM made their fortune. Look it up. Ooh. Yeah, where's that commercial, right? Where's that commercial? Also, we got Fanta. Fanta was made because the Germans didn't like cola. So they made Fanta, orange drink Fanta, for the Germans.
See, it's not ours, Pascal. You thought it was ours.
I love these little factoids, man. I mean,
that's dude.
That's wild, right?
People make these insipid commentaries about capitalism. Well, it's like, listen, this is a blood-sucking economic model that benefits from other political models, i.e., imperialism, that is premised on blood-sucking as well. So
it's the market providing. The market provided.
Exactly.
So what happens? So this is my fear. My fear is that because it is so powerful, because we do get to a point of self-censoring, and once you get the far right crazies out, right, the Alex Joneses or that's a false flag. Once you get false flag guy out of there, and then you suppress the left voice, which is what we've been seeing happen across the board with the internet, right? Doug Lane was talking last night on his live stream with Matt Bender about how the World Socialist website had found that over a certain period of years that they got suppressed in searches. I mean, search the word. I challenge anyone right now to search the word socialism. Just search socialism on Google and see what comes up. And you will have to go through so many negative reactionary sites to get to any sort of like World Socialist site or even the Green Party.
Well, I want to ask you guys an opinion, all right? And I know people who are in this range, and some people think that these people, they should be surrendered. What about COVID skeptics? Do we think that COVID skeptics should be suppressed, banned, shut down by all means, have their content rejected at all? Because there are many people who fundamentally believe that, for some, there are some who are, COVID is a hoax, period. I'm not one of those people. But there are others who believe that COVID-19 creates an opportunity for the lords of capital to structure our society in a way that expedites
the pandemic crowd. Yeah. That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
The environmental fascist people.
I'm more kind of like the Great Reset people, the so on and so forth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I will say why I'm sympathetic to those folks. Because I believe that capitalism will take any opportunity, even a pandemic, to reorchestrate society in a way that benefits the lords of capital to the disadvantage of the many. And I don't need to be a conspiracy theory to believe that. All I have to do is look at history.
Facts.
Look at that dickhead Rahm Emanuel, right? You never let a serious crisis go to waste.
I mean, there's definitely facts behind it, but I have to ask the bigger question is, if I suppress the...
Actually, that might have been Churchill, now that I think about it. But like Rahm Emanuel...
I think he reset it, though. Even if you suppress these people on social media, it definitely doesn't stop them from making movies, right? Go on Amazon, try to watch a documentary that isn't a far right propaganda piece.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that all the COVID skeptics are far right propagandists either. They range. They already.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely. That I think that there's people like from all kinds of political stripes that have their own reasons for doing that, and I think that's important because it's easy for us to point to all these things we don't like and think that they're all intertwined and extra.
Right, and I will say this, right? The consistent inconsistencies by the government's own media establishment on issues like how successful vaccines are going to be, or how many people will be quote unquote herd immunity, or how penetrable is the virus. And I've seen before my own eyes people like Fauci and others, and I'm not trying to call myself one of the COVID skeptics. I don't care what you think I am or not. I've seen them drop the ball and say things that contradicted.
Yeah. They slipped. They slipped in such a way that, like, whatever. Maybe they have the best of intentions, but it's you listen to it like, what?
But let me say this: I've had my girl who actually works in medical research on a couple times talking about that, and I don't think a lot of people understand. There's people that just when they come up with this stuff, I think people when they think of big pharmaceutical companies because they have these big offices, that a lot of that is just research, and it's not. It's not at all.
Yeah.
So they're going, hey, what didn't go to market? Let's run it up a flagpole and see if it works on this.
It's like a
conversation. I got some bad news for you. Call me. I am not an anti-vaxxer. All my children have vaccines. But when my girl, who is not political at all, the only time she ever steps in is when this conversation comes up, because she works in that field and she understands how it operates. I get the privilege of hearing her Zoom calls all the time and her frustrations. And the frustrations come from people getting frustrated at research because it gets in the way of profits. It takes years for shit to come to market. Years.
So if I may, on that point, are you guys familiar? This is going to sound like it's a wild digression, but you have to trust me, it's going somewhere. Are you familiar with how fast food companies will test market certain things? Like there's like, hey, we got this bacon cheeseburger and we're doing it on a pretzel bun.
Yeah.
And there's certain cities that they always like test things out. Columbus, Ohio is one of them. Like Miami's another one. They test out this different kind of food. But they test out these different kinds of food to like see like, hey, what happens when we put this out there? Do people like it? Does it? What kind of people like it, et cetera, et cetera. That same thing also happens with some of these ideas. And one of the reasons why is because we've allowed the situation where we're commodifying not just ideas, but the idea of ideas. And that in and of itself can be a brand builder. Look at Alex Jones. Frogs are gay. They're putting the thing in the water if the frogs are gay.
Frogs gay.
All right. Like, yeah. And that dude's like, I talked earlier when we were setting up about looking like, I was like the dude doing like the rant into his phone in a truck, right? Well, who's that if not like the grandchild of Alex Jones, who's like the antecedent of all that with better production values, basically. And I think that we're in a weird situation where the commodification of being the trusted source that like, well, no one else is going to tell you this stuff. Yeah, because it's crazy, because it's nuts. But that said, it doesn't mean that like, we'll put all your blind fealty into the government because they have their own agenda. Again, whether Churchill said it, which he did, and Rahm Emanuel said it, never let a crisis go to waste. And the pandemic crowd, that stuff is crazy bonkers nuts to me. but I get it, right? Like I get it because if you look at how our power structures are set, regardless of ethos, there is no populist representation, meaning any representation by the people, or very little, I should say, representation that represents the needs of the people. But there's a lot of people capitalizing on that, as they always have, to present themselves as the sole arbiter of like, I alone can fix it. No names mentioned. But because of that, there's been enough test marketing, putting the cheeseburger with the pretzel bun in certain markets and seeing how it plays over the years, that certain parties walked into the suit that wasn't originally tailored for them, but they were smart enough to know that it was there. This idea that it started off with creating these small circles of, Rush Limbaugh. I'm the only one that's giving it to you straight.
Yeah.
And here's where I'm going to turn it around.
Inside dope. I got the inside dope. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the only one that's going to tell you how it is. And then that leads to, what's that one fool? I can't remember. Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, all that stuff. But here's the deal.
That's a great analysis. It's fascinating you bring that up. How the birth of that kind of conspiracy, right-wing conspiracy kind of positionality, right? It starts under a liberal administration.
Yep.
A liberal administration that I don't like. I don't think that those of us on the left are fans of Clinton at all, because we see him as the liberal birth of neoliberalism, right? He's like, he kind of takes the flank, he takes the flag of neoliberal capitalism and he takes it deep into our territory in a way that the Republicans didn't. That being said, the kind of more tinfoil hat Republican nuttery, come on, Bill, there's bodies, all that stuff starts with Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And I've always kind of positioned, because I'm old enough to remember the Clinton, I'm not old enough to remember going back to Nixon, but don't to date myself. One of the reasons why I always believed why the right-wing chattering class came after Clinton is because, frankly, Clinton's presidency was not supposed to be. And when I mean Clinton's presidency was not supposed to be, is that you have to understand something. When Reagan won every state in the Union except Minnesota, which was Walter Mondale's home state, and then George Bush the father won in 1988, the logical assumption in this country was that liberals and Democrats were done. So when Clinton, all of the paranoia that the conservatives have about the 60s new left, they project it on Clinton. Hippie, lefty, smoking weed. Remember the I did not inhale?
Yeah, yeah, I do, of course.
Counterculture.
Because my parents were really busy inhaling. They inhaled plenty. So
yeah. Now Clinton really didn't even ideologically represent any of that stuff per se, but it was projected heavily. He was the first baby boomer president.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people remember
that. Yeah, no. So I think that's a super interesting point. And also the DLC, the rise of the DLC, like the rise of we're a different kind of Democrat. We like corporations. We what? So what's
we love corporations and we hate black people. We're good for America.
Welfare reform, the biggest thing that Clinton got accomplished. Yeah, I mean,
we'll put them in jail, kick them off welfare. You gotta love us. We're the Democrats.
And that was the beginning of that, and it was kind of a through line through what Reagan and Bush had been doing before. It was just like, oh yeah, but he plays a saxophone. I was like, all right, well, who cares about that, And I think that's a fascinating place to revisit, because look at the leadership in the House. 3 80-year-old people. Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, James Clyburn, 80-year-old people that come from that time where they got whooped so bad. They're like, look, we got to trick people. We got to trick people into voting for us because apparently so they're so haunted by that. It's like, they lost their nerve long ago, and it became so ingrained in their political philosophy to like, oh no, we always have to phrase things in a certain way. We have to convince people to like us. Where it's like, no, your policies are actually popular. You just don't have the courage of your convictions, because all of them are haunted by, 84 Mondale. Man, a lot of them are haunted by going all the way back to Nixon, like McGovern. How often do you hear McGovern used as just like, well, you can't have Bernie Sanders because McGovern? What? Like, it's not even the same situation.
I hope Harvey J.K. is watching this because he actually has some really good insight on the Democratic Party starting to shift neoliberal. Another very good book I advise everybody, if you can get it, is Yesterday's Man by Branko Markus. I'm sorry, I'm saying your name wrong. But it's a really good book talking about kind of Biden's trajectory politically, and also it's talking about the rightward shift of the Democratic Party during those years. Because
which he was key. He was key to that. Yeah,
it was a bipartisan consensus, and it starts before Carter.
Yeah,
it goes back to Carter, and it's bipartisan.
You guys familiar with the RAVE Act that Biden pushed forward in the early 2000s? You aware of this?
Was it about raves?
It was indeed. So the idea being that
yes,
he was not
Jerry Brown.
No, this is all Biden. I think Jerry Brown might have signed on to it, but he was doing this big push for it. But ultimately, he didn't like raves, didn't like them.
Yeah,
thought they weren't safe. So he put together this incredibly odious legislation that wouldn't just have affected raves, it would have affected warehouse shows and house shows and this and that, with all these bizarre punitive huge government in your private business overreaches just based on safety, which is interesting because when did that come around? The Patriot Act, where we're like, hey, we need to trade away some of our freedom so we can be safe. And that was a clear, and why am I talking about all this? Because that was a clear defining moment for our culture. That when we made that decision, or rather our elected representatives made it for us, once a genie is out of the bottle, you can't put it back. And with the manifestation of that, and here's where Orwell was wrong, is it wasn't government that took advantage of that big time. Now to some degree, yes, because there has been a lot of data mining for profiling in the name of terrorism. Well, if we call you a terrorist, then we got all these other tools now that we can do to put you in Gitmo and get what we need out of you, et cetera, et cetera. And that is terrifying, but that's like a C-level threat compared to what the rest of the Patriot Act has done. Because what it allowed is for the rise of these, bringing it all back home, these tech companies that mine every piece of your data, and that's just standard operating procedure.
Shazana Zuboff, I'm probably saying her, I'm really fucking up everybody's name. She wrote the book Surveillance Capitalism, and if you don't want to read the book, you can get it on Blinkist, 15 minutes, get the good points of it. There's definitely a lot of her on that Netflix documentary about big data, and there's some really good interviews of her discussing the issues with big data and data mining, and how it's becoming predictive. The AI is getting so intelligent that it is becoming predictive. Like she tells a story in her book where a woman goes to buy shampoo, and she is given on the back of your receipts, it's like things you might want, and she was given stuff for baby food, and she's like, why would I want baby food? I'm not even pregnant. I've never even had a kid. And she ended up being 3 months pregnant, and the AI noticed that she was buying different scented shampoo.
That's some Black Mirror stuff right there.
Predicting your pregnancy. What's going to be? What is that? Somebody said, don't forget Miss Hyphenated Surname wasn't going to be baking cookies either.
Rodham Clinton.
Oh.
Oh, wow. Pulling the classics.
I totally forgot about her.
You know what? I gotta say, back then, I was like, oh yeah, she's pretty cool. Before she was actually an elected office herself, I actually thought she was pretty cool. And then I was like, oh, she's awful. But the
She
only
was
thing,
less contemptible. She was less contemptible.
the only thing that I really like about Hillary Clinton is the one thing she never played up, was the fact that she is a ruthless regulator. Like, she's like, not regulation of capital, or like, I mean, like, she's a gangster. Like, she's like, the thing, like this whole Clinton crime family stuff that like the right wing likes to go off on, nonsense. But that said, that crowd, Bill and Hillary especially, do Godfather style stuff. I think that's cool, because I think you need to be ruthless. I think that like this idea of like the West Wing of like,
nothing about the Clintons you're gonna get me to think is cool.
yeah. Well, like I say, I want to be clear, not a fan in any way, shape, or form. But the idea that like, no, we're not treating this like it's patty cake. This ain't the West Wing. Like, that attitude. I wish that some people that shared my values and interests in policy could apply some of those same principles and be more ruthless. And again, like I don't want, let's not talk about like Vince Foster or any of that nonsense, like whatever. But I'm saying that is about the only damn thing that I've ever liked about Hillary Clinton. That other than the fact that it's like, some, oh yeah, she's not baking cookies with her. All right, that was a big deal back then. It's crazy to think about, right? Like, oh, she's not a traditional housewife, and that was a big deal then. And unfortunately, she's been coasting off of that. For the last 30 some odd years. Yeah, right. And you got all these people with the pink pussy hats that are like, like signing up for like the pink pussy hat army for Clinton, where it's like they imbue all of these other feminist ideals and progressive ideals onto this person that doesn't give a damn about any of that. It's a method for power. And so
she cares about that as long as it really can facilitate her corporate centrality in policy. In other words, as long as she can say, well, regulating the banks isn't going to stop racism.
Oh, yeah. The complete divorcing of class from anything, like making like race an identitarian thing rather than being anything tied into class.
That's the extent to which she'll use quote unquote talking points to facilitate her neoliberal.
Let's be honest, it works so well because when she gets platforms to speak on, like Ellen, Howard Stern, say what you want about Howard Stern. That's a huge fucking platform. When you can walk on that platform and say whatever the fuck you want to say,
and people listen.
People fuck, and you're not being challenged by the interviewer.
No.
So that's
not in certain ways. Yeah.
Is Rachel Maddow going to really challenge Hillary Clinton on MSNBC?
I'm glad you invoked the patron saint of Russiagate, because I would like to bring it back to an earlier point, which like we were talking about, like the Glenn Becks of the world, the Alex Jones of the world, the Chosen Facts crowd, and how there was a circuit that was built up over multi-decades that allowed to the QAnon folks for them to be able to come up and react in such a way that they have their own ecosystem. They have their own, not just chosen facts, there's not agreed upon set of facts, but they have their own everything. And a lot of it's tied into being a victim. A lot of it's tied into the fact that something's being done to us, but which is sort of like, okay, like really? Like we're doing that, huh? But I wanted to turn the fire back around towards liberals, and the fact that within the last 4 years, the idea of the boogeyman Vladimir Putin being commodified in such a way that like everyone is like making their bones on like, this is Russia, that's Russia, like Russia, and that's so odious. And what I find so interesting is the same people that like, oh wow, these QAnon crazies, blah blah blah, this and that. Like, I'm sorry, weren't you the one saying like, oh, Adam Schiff's gonna have like Donald Trump impeached within the end of the year? How the hell did that work out? Because you limited it to nonsense, chosen facts,
the liberal class and the liberal media, I think, helped QAnon be legitimized.
Of course, absolutely, because if you have someone that are not only pretending but outright stating that they're like, no, we're a news source. We're not doing advocacy. We're not doing the Fox News thing. Yes, you are. You absolutely are. But by the same token, going to turn it back around to other parts of, the quote unquote left. Look at Jimmy Dore. Look at that. Look at that half talent ranter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this guy, he's pulling the same thing of like, I'm the only one you can trust. I'm the only one telling you the facts. So this jackass is coming after like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and whatever, and is coming out being like, oh, well, they don't care about us, blah, 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 this and that. To say that's disingenuous and heartless is an overstatement. But it's part of the plan. And it's taking the MSNBC model that has been developed, that they've been very profitable for them, like the Russiagate thing, and just putting it down like indie band size, right? Like MSNBC is Metallica in this situation. And then whatever, like Jimmy Dore's trying to be like the Dillinger escape plan of political
at the same time, for me personally, I don't have affection for politicians, whether they're liberals or Democrats, liberals or conservatives.
Yeah.
And, you can say what you say about Jimmy Dore. I don't dislike Jimmy Dore. I think, I understand he's obnoxious and whatnot. At the same time,
that's his brand. So am I.
At the same time, my whole position is that we shouldn't romanticize any of these politicians, especially Bernie Sanders or anyone else, as being somehow the chosen savior. They're not saving us, right?
I agree.
At all. And,
I agree with that.
I think that the best we can expect is that they will listen when we push back against them.
The problem, this is my problem with that, is when Jimmy Dore takes a Chris Hedges talking point, which he does a lot.
He does a new metal version of it, yeah.
Oh, God, that's a good analogy. That's a great music analogy. That's a great music version of it. New metal version, mumble rap version.
Yeah.
Remember that movie Brown Sugar? Okay, remember that scene where he's in there with the hip hop Dalmatians? He goes, "What you going to do? Have a group called the Hip Hop Dalmatians?" White dude, and say the hoe is mine, and he walks in the room, and the next day doing the song, "The hoe is mine." That's what Jimmy Dore does. That's Jimmy opinion.
Dore. Yeah, no, I think
and so when he has people like Hedges on the show, because Jimmy Dore is a huge platform, and Hedges is going to talk to a guy that wants to talk to him. Let's just be honest, with a big platform. And he's not interrogating what Dore is saying as much, because Jimmy Dore is going to do that thing where he kisses the ring and he moves out the way and he lets Hedges take that very interesting deeper dive into the surface level of what he's saying, and then give you a real critique of power, empire, and the problems of capital. Dore does none of that and makes it about colored broads, a colored broad that he doesn't like because he has what Conan coined a few years ago on tour, a hate boner for AOC, because he sees all that ass.
Yep. And
he is mad that she gives no fucks about anything he's got to say. That's a joke. I don't know if that's really why he's mad at her, but he does have a weird hate for
that. But that explains the fixation for sure, and it's certainly part of the puzzle. And I think it's important to note too. One thing I want to mention, by the way, and sometimes I'll say stuff and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's pretty good, and that's what I'm like, yeah, hate boner, that's pretty good. Because that like what's it, Ben Garrison? Is that fellow's name? The fellow makes all like political cartoons. It's like they're weirdly thirsty, like all of them. Like and it's just like, what, man?
Because they don't say that shit. You could easily put Jayapal, who has more experience and actually a higher ranking member of Congress, as the person that you're mad at.
Right.
But you'd rather be mad at the one that's got a bigger internet platform.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that's in, I feel like like these same fools that are like, I don't see color. It's like they like don't want to acknowledge that aspect of it, right? When someone says they're telegenic too, like a lot of times that means, all right, they're attractive. Real talk. And whatever, like the fact, I think it's bizarre that that's just not acknowledged at all, because it sounds bad when you think about it. But when you talk about, I do want to address one point that Pascal made in reference to me invoking Jimmy Dore, and I've said it a second time, so if I say it a third time, I'm sure he pops up like Beetlejuice.
Jack off.
But that dude, like saying like I have what I feel are very valid critiques of that guy, and which is to say that he's trying to present himself as like the progressive equivalent of like Alex Jones or
I agree. Howard, I think he's trying to be progressive Howard Stern.
Yeah, right. That's the attempt, and in the same way,
I think that's a critique. I think it's a fair critique.
Well, but hold on. What I wanted to get at is that by me bagging on Jimmy Dore, rightly, because he's a jackass a lot of the times, is that it doesn't mean that I don't think that we should critique our elected leaders. In fact, I think we should. I just think his critiques are BS, and I think his critiques are they're not based in anything that's going to advance power in any way. Let's explain why. So he's talking about force the vote, right? Jimmy Dore has no idea what goes on in Congress. He has no idea what she's getting out of it. He's assuming like the worst case scenario. Here's the problem I have with when WikiLeaks dropped all of the ambassadors' information, all the ambassadors' emails. This is one of the big things that brought them to power, right? Everyone's like, oh, well, all information should be free. Yeah, should it? Because that's not how ambassadors work. I think you think how ambassadors work, but they don't. And you're only seeing part of the puzzle with that. Why do I invoke WikiLeaks with it? Because there was this entitlement complex that showed up with that everyone's, oh, I know I'm going to galaxy brain, Monday morning quarterback, all this stuff that these elected representatives are doing, thinking I have the whole picture. I guarantee you don't. I'm not saying it looks like House of Cards or anything, but I'm guaranteeing you don't. And I think it's disingenuous that trust but verify. Right? Like you don't want to put blind fealty in anything. Like Bernie Sanders isn't, there's probably no one closer to my personal worldview in politics that I can think of it than Bernie Sanders. There's still stuff I don't agree with him on.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But I don't have blind fealty to any of that. He should be questioned. But don't assume you know everything. Like this idea of like, even us guys talking. Right? We're all coming from a very informed place. Everyone has their areas of expertise. Everyone has their opinions, their analysis. We don't know everything. How would we know everything?
That's true.
We don't even know what's going on like behind the curtain. Like, for all we know.
Very good point.
You know what I mean?
There is the reality of hubris amongst left criticizers of power. That's true. That's a very legitimate criticism. There's a kind of sense that we get from a bunch of commentators who haven't run in and out of their own room, no less run a government, that they are the correct analyzers of why X, Y, Z is happening, not happening, or shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. And assuming that they are the bearers of truth and that should not be questioned, and we should listen to them. And to your ultimate point, Conan, how does that, and I'm not saying I agree with this statement, but it's a fair question to ask. What makes them different from Rush Limbaugh in 1992, or what evolved and went down the... Now, I believe, right, I observe right-wing content, left-wing content, different types. I'm not a fan of right-wing content because it's easier to find people who will platform it. There's money that pushes it. You have
it's more lucrative. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's more lucrative. You have libertarian sites. You have all kinds of. I find that a lot of the kind of left progressive stuff is a little soft to me. It's a little soft to me in that they're basically they're liberals who are cosplaying radical.
That's real talk.
I find some of the harder, more left stuff can be very good, very informative. It also can be kind of informed by an ultra leftism that doesn't give you a real political solution to how to do anything except revolution.
Can I say something? So yesterday, to what you're saying, Pascal and Conan. So yesterday, someone, what's the woman from the Majority Report? Jamie said something.
Yeah, Jamie Elizabeth. Yeah,
Jamie Elizabeth said something on Twitter about which I'm so mad I responded anything. She goes, "I don't like these wannabe Marxist analysis of the people that stormed the Capitol." And I just asked a simple question: like, do you not like that people think they're all rich or that they're all kind of inbred poor rednecks? And all these people started responding to me. And I'm just asking a question. I'm not asking it like I'm literally asking like, well, what is your problem with this? And so the response started to be that everybody was more well off because of these certain factors. So a friend of mine who I hope is watching this said, well, the guy that had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk got a PPP loan. Well, that loan was only for $9,000. That's not that much money, depending on what your business is and how much your operating costs are. I know people that got PPP loans. They are not doing what they were doing before the pandemic because they only got $1,000 and $1,500. That's not that much fucking money. So I don't know what dude's business was, and $9,000 for most people I know, even if you're fucking trying to start a band, you're not going to last that long on $9,000 for a year.
Yeah.
And then another talk was, well, another lady took a private jet, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And so they put the article up. It was a New York Daily News article about this woman on a private jet, but she had chartered a private jet. I am not rich. I literally have $5.37 in my bank account right now. I am the epitome of not rich. This is what not rich looks like. I've taken a private jet on several occasions because it's cheap as fuck right now, because who the fuck owns a private jet?
Yeah.
Not many people. So there's companies like Jet SweetX where you can charter a private jet. You don't go into the regular airport. You don't got to take your shoes off. There's a little Starbucks machine in the fucking place that give you coffee. It's dope. And you know what? It was cheaper than Southwest.
So that's fascinating. The last, technically second to last tour that I went on in 2020 before COVID hit, because we got 2 days into the second one before we had to cancel everything. The one where we went down to Texas for the No Coast Fest in 2020. Erica from the band, the excellent band. Are we cursing on this?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, because her band name's Motherfucker. Right?
Motherfucker.
Yeah.
Shout out to Erica.
Yeah. She into the tour, she flew back to Atlanta, and rather than like come all the way back with us up to Milwaukee, she just flew back out of I think it was Dallas, right? Which was whatever the last show was. And as you say, the private jet in that situation was considerably cheaper than just like a regular flight on like American Airlines, or like who the hell even like, goes to Atlanta. So using like private jet is like, that's shorthand for rich dude people. It's like they're doing rich people stuff, and it's like, yeah, that's not exactly true, and it's disingenuous, and I think that comes back to the bubble that is now the sort of like, I'll call it the DSA style bubble.
Ooh.
Right?
Call it, say it again.
I know. I'm a DSA member. I'm a DSA member, but go for it.
Yeah. I actually dig DSA as an organization, but if we can't just assume that we, like, let's just say like the progressive left, that we're immune from bubbles. We are not immune from bubbles. And we need to think about the fact, if we want to, would we rather be correct, or would we rather get things done and advance our goals? And I think there's a bunch of people that would just rather be correct, frankly, because it's more immediately gratifying. And I do believe we can have better things. I do believe that. And I am always like, man, I have major problems with the Green Party. Like the fact, like, what's the foreign policy? Don't wage war? Okay, now what? We're in a war. Got nothing? Like Jill Stein, when she was put on, both her and Gary Johnson, that fool, they got higher levels of public scrutiny in 2016 than like any third-party candidate in history. Neither one of them held up to close scrutiny. You know why? They didn't have to. You just like spout your talking points, donate here, away you go. And again, we've spent a lot of times lighting up, the Democrats, lighting up the Republicans. No one doesn't get the fire, because the reason why is that they're running different kinds of game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some people would rather be correct than get anything done. I love Jamie Peck. I think Jamie is rad as hell. Then again, of course I do. She's a beautiful goth girl who's like into politics. All right, well, what am I gonna say? I gotta type, I guess. But I think she's cool as hell. I think sometimes she falls into that would rather be correct than get things done world. And I don't say that lightly. I think she's sharp and incisive, and I think she asks all the right questions. But I don't think I necessarily agree with her on all the solutions.
I would. This is the problem I have. These people want to be correct about things that are ultimately just opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Here's your trophy. Here's your opinion trophy. Welcome.
And so here's what kind of frustrates me about the whole conversation. We're sitting here having a conversation about who defines what a working class person is, right?
Right.
It's almost like who defines what is worthy of being part of your movement or whatever the fuck. And I'm sitting here going, look, you can say this lady's rich. The article says she's a realtor in like Texas, I believe, somewhere. And then I was like, well, she's a realtor. I don't know if she sells commercial or residential.
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah, exactly.
Probably residential property. I don't know if she sells a house a month or if it supplements some sort of side income. Like, I don't think people understand. I live in California. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, one of the most expensive places to live in the world. And I know realtors that don't make that much money.
Yeah. It's
not like just because you sell a house, you're rich.
Well, totally. Because the idea that like vocation determines caste. Is it cast or cased?
Cast.
Yes.
Cast? Is it? Okay. Because I always said caste system, and then like somebody said cased, and then I'm like, which one's right? I don't know. I do the like read too much, and didn't have anyone to discuss this stuff with for years. But like, I think vocation doesn't determine level of social order within a capitalist society, and it's disingenuous to say so. And I think it's something that really needs to be addressed in the same way that identitarian politics purposely doesn't address class, and it doesn't address class purposely because you can't be fueling corporate interests and also be addressing class. You can, it's not possible. They're at loggerheads. But by the same token, of course, you want to get the black people involved. You want to get black people to vote for you. So you just take the class out.
It also obscures the fact that there are class interests that exist amongst racial or ethnic categories that exist inside American society.
Like, you have to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Who have corporate interests that work to the disadvantage of the majority of Black America.
Well, that clip, we played a clip for our Thursday show from a 1994 very short-lived show on HBO called Cosmic Slop, which was billed as like a black Twilight Zone with George Clinton hosting. And the first episode, no one watched it. It only aired twice. No one watched it.
I'd watch it. That sounds awesome.
It came on when Mr. Show came on, so I was up when it came on, and I was like, "This is the coolest thing ever." So I sent it to Pascal, and I used it as an opening for our Thursday show. And the first little vignette is aliens come down and talk to the government, the U.S. government, and say, "We will give you riches. You'll have abundance for years. We'll clean your polluted environment. We ask for one thing, and that's all of your black people."
Whoa.
And what happens? There's a class of black people, a very select, rich class, where the president goes, "Look, I'll let 100 of you ends go to Europe."
Wow.
We'll sneak 100 out.
Wow.
And there was definitely like they wanted a certain skin tone. It's a great episode. I advise everybody. It's called Cosmic Slop. You can get it on YouTube.
Maybe they can get Jordan Peele to redo it or something, like someone with a little more swagger.
It felt like something that he probably watched.
Yeah, that's wild.
I could see him watching that. The guy that was behind it is Reginald Hudlin. So if you're familiar with the House Party films,
okay,
did it. Robert Guillaume was in it. They had actually some really great actors in this one. But the class conversation we talk about, like a black politic, is never one that's had in the mainstream, even on left media. It's always
the
black vote.
Well, exactly, as if as if it's a uniform thing, right? Which is it drives me crazy, and having to deal with so many knuckleheads that were like, oh, well, Bernie Sanders has a problem with black people. I'm like, oh, you just saying something doesn't make it true.
I have a problem with black people.
Yeah. Well, because what is black people like? Because it'd be real easy for me to be like, yo, I got a problem with white people. Look at all these fools, like, insurrecting right now. Insurrecting, is that? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, that's white culture, right?
But it's not. It is, but it isn't. Like, I don't want to be associated with any of that. No one I don't want to be associated with anything like that. But again, it's wildly reductive, and the idea that, like, quote unquote white culture is hegemonically.
The dispatch of that kind of ideology is done intentionally to obfuscate from the internal class contradictions that exist in black society that facilitate complete and total connection to one political party, to the detriment of most black folk.
Well, with a complete lack of critical thinking because of that cultural domination.
Yes.
And the idea that, like, well, where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to go? Going to go with these guys? Like, with the tiki torches? Them? That's the ones.
But so many do. So many do.
Well, because they don't feel like they have a choice. And they're like, hey, man, F you. And it's registering a protest. And some of them, maybe they fall for the faux populist rhetoric, like the like where they're picking and choosing what can and can't. What was the Louisiana governor years back, like populist guy? No. It's funny. I'm talking about Huey Long. God, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? So the idea that like and the idea, and I listened to some show where they were talking about how populism was sort of intentionally rebranded to be nationalism, like meaning that, like, this use a word, like purposely misuse a word in so many ways, so many times, that when you have a larger audience, you can change the meaning of that word. What does socialism mean? Well, socialism means I hate Tulpa that all these fools don't like, because that's how it's been used for years. And like corporate Democrats are like, well, I'm not a socialist. I don't care about that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to fight against it. Like,
I
whatever.
beat the socialist, man.
I beat the socialists. Yeah, exactly. And that's just the most recent example. But that's happening for like years and years. Whereas really, like, socialism, I mean, the New Deal, like like unemployment insurance is socialism. But the idea is that people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about it in terms of like the other. It's like people can be othered and are othered. Ideas can be othered as well. And when you have a two-front war, which in this case you have sort of is like, crypto fascist nativist.
At the same time, though, I think that for me, as someone who was a socialist who was on the left well before Bernie Sanders,
sure,
reducing socialism to Keynesianism, is a problem. Like,
not the same thing.
When I hear people who are Sanders acolytes, DSA types, say, the New Deal was socialist. No, the New Deal was proposed to neutralize.
Yeah, exactly. That was the compromise.
FDR said
the New Deal was a compromise.
Saving capitalism.
Yes.
With the New Deal.
It was the Elizabeth Warren mindset of the time.
I'm very leery of this notion of the New Deal is a public goods governance model that comes forth after communists and socialists literally forced the ruling class to concessions that makes them have to create public goods governance or state capitalism in response to exigent demands for more wealth transfer to the poor and working class. It is a reaction that utilizes ideas that were socialist, but Keynesian New Dealism is not socialism.
Completely agreed. And
I
Pascal, I
would
think that's a
also
great
agree
point.
that Keynesian New Dealism is more radical than anything we've had in 50 years in American politics.
Yeah, yep, 100%. And I think it's amazing that. So we talk about ratchet theory. You guys familiar with ratchet theory, right?
Is that about shitty women?
no. Dang, you went there, huh? All right. Whew.
I think ratchet theory got me all these damn kids.
Oh, all right. So the idea with it's a ratchet effect, right? It's so that there's a lot of applications of it. But the idea is that when the discourse is moved to one degree or the other, and we're going to say in this case the discourse is moved right. The discourse is moved more towards corporatist. We'll call it New Deal, neoliberal, however you want to call it. The idea that as the discourse is moved right, the moderate function shifts, meaning that like if you were to look at like and I think the idea of a pure political spectrum that's just left and right is disingenuous. But the purposes of this, and specifically addressing Pascal's point about the New Deal and how the New Deal was the compromise. The New Deal wasn't like the socialist thing. It was like, hey, we need to do this. The socialists are going to rise up. So as we've gone on in recent decades, there's been a push through the DLC, Rahm Emanuel, Clintonism, et cetera, unfortunately continued through Obama. And
Milton Friedman.
The Friedmanites, exactly. That the entire discourse has moved to the right. So we get to the point where, Elizabeth Warren, she's just a hyper liberal, like whatever. It's like she's actually like a regulation-minded capitalist that's maybe a little left of the traditional political center. Like if you look at European nations versus us, our entire rhetoric has moved so far to the right as ratchet theory. Because once it moves to the right, the middle now shifts because it's backed up by media institutions where the quote unquote middle that everyone mythologizes and tries to put as some great grand high standard in the sky because of ratchet theory has moved more and more to serve corporate interests, to serve capital in that way. And they're not even secretive about it. That's just how it's done. But the entire, even in my lifetime, we've moved like several clicks over to the right, that when people are talking about, Bernie Sanders is like a Maoist revolutionary, not even a little bit. He's basically like a New Deal Democrat, like an FDR or something, which again, as Pascal pointed out, that was the compromise. So, and again, you can't look at things just on a strict left-right axis. But when we talk about ratchet theory, one of the problems I have, I'm taking it all back home now, with this progressive, DSA style bubble, is this idea that we can just be correct about a bunch of stuff, and that changes everything. That doesn't advance power. And this idea that like we have to divorce rhetoric from politics and from elections, I think it's very dangerous because in our current setup right now, how we have our government, how we process things, we have to pay attention to elections. And that's why I think Justice Democrats is doing incredible work right now. That they're targeting people like Henry Cuellar, that didn't work out. Dan Lipinski, that did. And also targeting people that have that, again, bringing it back home to earlier, that we lost in '84 and got our asses kicked, Mondale effect, the ghost of George McGovern, getting those people out of there. And people can frame that as a generational thing all they like. Cori Bush is a different type of politician than the person that came before her. And that is the advancement of good for the political process. Whether you're like, a Keynesian, whether you're like a Matt Stoller type, who I love, by the way, whether you're even Jimmy Dore, that advances power, whether he's an asshole about it or not. It advances power. But because of ratchet theory, we have to deal with the fact that the conversation is going to drift ever rightward until we pay attention to it. In the same way that socialism, again, was used as a hate tulpa for years for things that right-wingers didn't like. And it was allowed to be that way because language matters. Read George Lakoff. Language matters. Framing matters. We live in a frame-based reality now. And the right wing QAnon is the perfect example of that. That is frames personified. Trumpism is an example of that. Frames personified. Again, we have to be real careful about falling into the what is it, the De Niro movie with Ben Stiller, where he talks about like the circle of trust. What you know what I'm talking about?
Circle of trust. Meet the Parents.
Meet the Parents. Thank you. We gotta watch out. We don't fall into that Meet the Parents philosophy of like you're not in the circle of trust.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that was a very good movie. I mean, it was kind of like whatever, kind of goof ass, but I was like, oh man, he's talking about frames. Like if you stop and think about it.
Did you know that Terry Polo, who plays the girlfriend/wife in that movie, was hired because Gwyneth Paltrow, who is the real daughter of Blythe Danner, declined to be in the film?
I didn't know any of that. Wow, this is again we're ruling it on trivia today.
There you go.
And so then tying all that back to the original conceit of your essay, your Kill the Poor essay, mm-hmm. Jason. Maybe with my limited platform on Twitter, which is largely,
music
it's largely music, right? Like every once in a while, like I'll engage with people on politics and stuff, and I can actually affect some good. But I am not in the circle of trust of the progressive media. Why would I be?
Yeah,
like other than like being on your show now and again, and other than like direct action work of like being in the streets and volunteering and things along those lines, I'm not a part of the progressive media infrastructure. So because of that, when
Conan does direct action work,
I do, and I'm not always, I don't always post it to social media because I doubt the efficacy of that, which goes back to the Facebook argument. But finishing the point that I was saying right now, when your banning from Facebook for that essay happened, one of the things I did is I went on Twitter and I started trying to tag people. So I tagged like, Jamie Peck, who I mentioned, who I like, Emma Vigeland, formerly of the Young Turks and the Majority Report, David Dayen, who I worked with on political stuff like years and years ago before he was David Dayen, who's he's awesome. I love David. Even former guest of your show, Ben Burgess. But who the hell am I? Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm outside that circle of trust.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'm outside that circle of trust, I'm bringing something forward of like, hey, this is kind of a big deal. Like as much as I'm enjoying having this conversation with you guys, this should be on one of like, like one of the big ones. This should be on like Chapo Trap House or whatever. Like, dropping names of like, the Foo Fighters of progressive podcasting, right?
I think I was kind of shocked that more people didn't. I mean, Ben Burgess, I didn't hit him up because I had to refriend everybody, right? I had to hit Doug Lane up, and he wouldn't friend me because he thought it was fake. He's like, well, we're friends already, and we have to communicate because we do this thing on Zero Books.
Yeah. And
he was like, oh, what? His first reaction was like, what? They banned you for what? And I was talking to Jean Bajlan and I was sending him the essay. He's like, they banned you for this? I was like, dude, they didn't just ban me. They deleted me. And I think that's another thing I have to tell people. People go, oh, well, I was in Facebook. It's like, this ain't no Facebook jail. This is, they deleted my profile.
They find a solution to you.
It's like that Black Mirror episode where John, is his name John Hamm? Is that his name, the actor?
Oh yeah.
Where his wife hits the button and he becomes invisible to people that matter to him.
Right.
And that's kind of what happens when you get deleted from social media. You become invisible to people that matter to you.
And we like it when it's Glenn Beck or Donald Trump, right? We like it. Yeah. Good. Fuck them. But like, here's the deal. If we're just allowing that to be like an arbitrary decision, when the winds of opinion change, what does that mean? Well, it means that like the fellow you mentioned, the socialist world, whatever it was.
The socialist world website, yeah.
Yeah, which I, like, it's like one of those things. It's like, like about 40% of this, like 20% of it's like crankcase stuff, and 20% of it isn't for me. Okay, well, fine, but like, you can't change the fact that like they got in search results, as you mentioned earlier, again as a callback, you look up the word socialism, they don't show up, and it's like it's in the name. It'd be like if you tried to look up Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends and only Conan O'Brien results came up. And it'd be like, what? I put in the name, fool.
It's no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so to follow up on that point, it's real easy to be like, yeah, get him, Butch, get him. You know, when it's someone like Glenn Beck or when it's Donald Trump, they deserve it. But if they have that sort of, almost not even executive power, but like royal power to just selectively enforce things, it's a valid critique to say, at what point do they become a public square? At what point is that regulated? Who should be regulating that? And let's also talk about the fact that, like, with as old as our elected representatives are, most of these fools barely understand the internet, but they understand what Facebook is because it's their landing page, as we talked about earlier. So do we go for the hard regulation? Because if we're going to do it, now's the time to do it, where all these assholes are all worked up because they feel like, they're personally attacked, these cry bullies, right? And if we're going to do it now. In the same way that we should do electoral reform right now. Don't get me started on black box voting, but like they're focused on all the wrong thing right now. But the fact is, central tabulation servers with like open back-in passwords that like have never been changed is a threat to our democracy. They're talking about some crazy stuff over there. But that said, it needs to be addressed. So do it now.
Who took the duffel bags?
Do it now. Like, never let a crisis go to waste. Like, we don't have to just sit here and take it. We don't have to sit here and be like, well, it sucks that that's happening. Let's analyze it from a freaking socialist perspective. Okay, fine. But we can also take action. You know what I mean? And like we need to understand that coalition building doesn't mean the West Wing. Coalition building also doesn't mean that like you buy into what someone else is doing, like what their ethos is. Someone can be useful to you as a coalition, and then after you're like, hey, fuck you, and then you go on your merry way. But we don't do that. We don't do that because again, and I'm using the colloquial we'd rather be correct than get things done. That's kind of what I'm saying. Sure.
Who is the we you're talking about here, though?
So I'm talking about what I assume is mostly the audience for this show, like the progressive left in this situation, people that are not institutionalist, establishment-minded, people that understand that Republican Party and Democratic Party are serving corporate end goals, and that is the feature, not the bug. Now, people have different prescriptions and solutions for that. I might have a different solution than you do. I don't know. But I am saying that, like, if we have agreed upon set of facts, which is half the problem, right? If we agree with the crazies, if we agree with these QAnon crazies that, like, hey, maybe Facebook and Twitter should be considered a public square, what does that mean next? Well, they're going to ask for their speech to be protected and like try to have some weasel language where they can like crack down on progressive and liberals. So we're talking about solutions now. I'm talking about actual coalition building, not what Biden thinks is going to happen, which is like a bunch of Republicans to get on board with the stimulus package. That ain't going to happen. That's West Wing shit. It's not going to happen. But the we in this case can mean a lot of things, but we need to get out of our bubbles in a way that affects power. So, and if they're not public spaces, which somebody, Kerry Robinson in the chat box said they're not public spaces. Okay, fine. So then they're private entities with terms and services. So what are we talking about? Like, again, there needs to be definitionally letting this be letting this go in this gray area where no one quite understands what the hell's going on. Mm-hmm. That don't fly, man.
Well, all that being said, we're coming up on 2 hours, and I have to make breakfast for a very attractive woman and make food for a very hyper beige child. Pascal, do you have any parting remarks?
I mean, my position. Listen, I really appreciated Conan being here because there's a lot that he said that I agree with. Some I kind of disagree with. His discussion of rational theory and the importance of framing, I do agree with the importance of framing. I also agree with maintaining the principles of your political position, and that just because we come into this after a 50-year period of counter-revolution doesn't mean that we have to be afraid to talk about actual socialism because Donald Trump is going to turn us into a bunch of, cosplaying Bolsheviks. and the right is going to frame us in a certain way. Because that's being said, Sanders framed himself as a socialist. He didn't run away from that label, and he could have run away from it at some point or explained it away. He did not. The DSA called themselves the Democratic Socialists of America, as progressivists as they might be. So I understand the nature of framing and the reality of the Overton window shifting right or left, and the need to make your political framing in a way that is as expansive to people being interested in it. I'm also interested in having a political understanding of what you're fighting for. What does it mean to challenge capitalism, imperialism, racism, and sexism? What does that mean? Does being, Rose Twitter mean that you really challenge the United States having 800 military bases around the world while having the military contracts to build factories in your neighborhood be something that you say, no, we shouldn't do that? Or voting against military budgets. Is that a priority that's a priority for you? Or what does it mean to be an anti-capitalist and an anti-imperialist and an anti-racist and an anti-sexist? For me, clarifying those points have a priority to simply just worrying about the framing being made appealing to certain categories of people. But I don't want you to think, Conan, that I'm disregarding your concern. I'm not saying it's not a valid concern. What I'm saying is that I'm seeing it being used by the same faction of the left that I think we both demonstrated we have problems with, as a means of them maintaining rather bland politics from a left perspective. I got my political education writing for almost a decade for Black Agenda Report under Bruce Dixon. There were certain things that weren't a question for me in an environment of learning about, why imperialism is problematic, why separating racism from capitalism is ridiculous, why it's important as a man to challenge sexism and deal with my own internal contradictions of why I don't place women's voices in the position that they need to be. Why having homophobic opinions about people who are gay is stupid. And having that confrontation within myself come from a brother who was a former member of the Chicago Black Panther Party and had transcended all of those confrontations in himself was a very important experience in my life. And what I'm saying is that I don't think it would require people who come from that Black political experience of being on the Black left to have to surrender their principles just for the sake of, quote unquote, worrying about framing. You see, you follow what I'm saying, Conan?
I think
I don't.
You lost him.
I totally do. And I think that this is a much larger conversation that, and by the way, I just want to mention that I'm now, I was ranting about the white dude with the truck, ranting into his phone. I ran out of my battery, so that's literally what I'm doing right now. But I think you're on, some important stuff, and I think that that's a larger conversation that we're probably not going to have right now.
No, because like I said, I have to make breakfast.
And first of all, so let me just say, if I may, and Pascal, I don't want to impede upon you, but again, dealing with some battery issues. I think that first of all, this has been great, and anytime you guys want me to have me on, I'm happy to talk about this, ranting into a camera or not, and. I think there's a couple things that I just like to everyone to come away with from my world, which is if we're talking about social media, which is how this all started, and the imperial decisions that social media can make regarding huge parts of our life. We have to decide if it's a private enterprise or a public square, and if it's going to be regulated, and is it going to be regulated or not? And and are we going to build a coalition to address that? Can we temporarily team up with people we dislike to accomplish that with a shared goal? I don't know. I don't know the answers to those questions, but those are the questions. Because I would rather, because again, there's a lot of people that would rather be correct than get anything done. And I think we can have better things, and I think it absolutely has to be addressed. And I think we're at a breaking point with it. That if we don't address it, we're in a rough spot.
Well,
that's a very, and I don't have a fast and loose answer to that question. I think that's the question that needs to be asked going forward. Are you serious about this? If you're serious, then we have to debate whether this is a public utility or is this going to stay a private thoroughfare, period. Right.
Yep.
If you're not willing to have that conversation, put your guns down and walk home, because that's not the adult thing in the room right now.
Go put your internet guns down and walk home.
Your internet.
Put down the internet and walk away.
Twitter, because I don't. So many. Oh God. So it's Saturday. When I was a kid, and I don't know if it was the same way for you, Conan, and I can't speak for you, Pascal, but I'm sure there was a moment where you had hair like me. When I got dropped off at the hood ass barbershop in Richmond, California, it was definitely whose phone's ringing?
I don't know. I think someone's trying to call me.
Caller, you're on the air.
But what I was going to say was on Saturday, it's always the busy day at the barbershop. And this is where these kind of conversations in my world were had at the barbershop on 23rd Street in Richmond, California. And that's what this is kind of like for me. It's a moment where we're sitting around waiting to get cut. And the good
which I need, man. I got mad COVID hair.
You
right
do.
Now.
You
look
like a crazy man. And Conan actually is all, when he does perform, he's all fitted and got a sparkly suit on and all the tie, the whole nine.
Yeah, I'm raggedy right now.
That being said, there was always some good times that were had afterwards. So I found the clip. I did play this clip. If you watched the Thursday stream, I played it. But I know because Conan's here, there's some people that have never seen this show before, and that's fine. So I'm going to play it again because I think this show is very entertaining. And this is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And this show came out in 1994. And so aliens have landed and they are asking the vice president of the United States for all of the black people. And the aliens figure that the only way for the American power system to understand them is if they turn into Ronald Reagan and talk. Which is
damn. That's real.
So enjoy this clip. Everyone have a very nice weekend. It's going to be very nice. Greatest weekend ever.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right, brother.
So don't hang up just yet, Conan. You got to see this.
3 months ago, speculation has run rampant as to their appearance, the size and shape of their craft. Oh my God! Literally, a killer spacecraft have just materialized from nowhere right over our heads. This is absolutely amazing. This is literally an unbelievable sight. You know, as I look to my left, I see Vice President D'Amato and Secretary of State Buchanan approaching the microphone. For those of you who are concerned, President Taylor, of course, is safe and secure in an undisclosed bunker until it's determined whether or not these aliens pose any threat.
Hello? Hello? Is this on? Can you understand me? I'm the Vice President of...
We are space traders bearing exquisite gifts that will restore your nation to its former glory. Nearly limitless quantities of gold and precious metals that will instantly erase your deficit. Machines that will renew your rivers and your air. Cold fusion technology for a safe, cheap, and inexhaustible source of energy. All we ask in return is the delivery to our vessels. 5 days from now, every child, woman, and man in your nation with at least 2,500 milligrams of melanin in their skin per square centimeter.
What the hell is melanin?
Put more simply, in trade for solving all your most pressing, domestic catastrophes. We are asking for every person in your country that you would classify as black.
Are you kidding?
No, we are not.
What are you going to do with them?
Well, that does not concern you. We give you 5 days to decide, and the offer is non-negotiable. We will not try to coerce you in any way. Yet, I hope we can do some business together.
Damn.
We wait all this time for a fucking UFO and they come here with this? It's all bullshit, right?
Maybe. Maybe this day's going to go down in history. An end to poverty, end to pollution, cheap, unlimited energy for every American. Sounds like a hell of a re-election platform.
Sam, I have to go on record as saying this is crazy. But
what?
well, welfare rolls would be cut 40%. Food stamps, Medicare, drug abuse programs slashed.
May I add something, Mr. President? You know, if I could guarantee the prosperity of this great country by giving life or taking off of those space traders, I'd do so without a moment's hesitation.
You know, the Secretary's courage is not unlike that American men and women have exhibited when called to military service. Well, some go more willingly than others, but almost all go with the knowledge that they might never come back.
I don't believe what I'm hearing. Doesn't anybody see a downside to this?
You know, Casper's absolutely right. The guilt that many whites would feel for sending the blacks away could take a severe psychological toll, with medical costs possibly reaching astronomical levels.
This is madness. Our military services would be decimated, depleted of 30% of our manpower.
But with unlimited energy, think of the weapons you could create.
Mr. President, Sam, you were elected by the slimmest of margins. Your African-American vote was key.
I don't expect them to be thrilled, but how can I put this delicately? Their future electoral clout is going to be severely limited.
And Casper, let's be honest. Do you really think the aliens will treat them worse than we have?
No, the real issue here is spin control. The decision has to be the will of the people and not the administration policy.
How about a national referendum? Have MCI fire up a couple of those yes and no 900 numbers.
I'll be damned. We're on to something here. Professor Golightly, you look like you want to say something.
Gentlemen. Gentlemen, gentlemen. As you know, Mr. President, I have been a lifelong card-carrying Republican. I feel I was instrumental in your moderate wing wresting control of the party from religious extremists. I have often supported this administration's repeal of affirmative action legislation, not protested its decreasing handouts to the poor. And in helping you undermine these policies, I realized that your reasons for doing so differed from mine. And yet I was always a good soldier for the party. I sincerely believed, and still believe, that black people need to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet without the crutches of governmental legislation. But I'm afraid I must protest in the strongest terms possible what I've heard in this room today. What is being proposed cannot be passed off euphemistically as selective service. At its best, it is group banishment. At its worst, it is utter and complete extermination.
Oh, Professor, that's ridiculous.
Wait. Did I miss something? Who said anything about exterminate? Well, this space traders seem perfectly nice and civil. Their planet might be one great
Wow.
big Club Med for all we know.
Wow.
Sam, we do not even know if these creatures can deliver on their end. You and I play poker together. What if they're as good at bluffing as you are?
Now you're whistling Dixie.
Whoa.
I still think the U.S. would say yes.
Oh, I was about to say, "What's up, Joe Biden?" On that last one.
And so they actually asked the aliens to do something to explain that they actually can do these things, and they turn the Statue of Liberty into solid gold. And by doing that, it becomes worth like $15 trillion, enough to pay off the national debt and have every single American not have to pay taxes for so many years. And so like the guy playing a Bill Clinton-esque president says, they fire up to 900 numbers. But what was really interesting, a yes and no number for people to call. What was really interesting in that was they used polling data. So there's a conversation, and I'll be very quick about this because I think I hear the pitter patter of feet. They go, well, polling data says that the majority of white people are against this. And then Robert Guillaume goes, yeah, but that's polling data. People can vote in the privacy of their own home. They're being asked a question in public. You're going to give a very different answer because no one has to go back and see what you actually said. Conan, who did you vote for?
Yeah,
we have a vote for Bernie pin on Bernie Sanders. You know,
yeah, exactly. Which is that's the performative thing, right? Versus what people actually do. Like the fact that when they talk about this, it's a silent majority of Trump voters. That's BS. But there are a bunch of people that are like, well, actually, I think both the candidates suck. Like, man, fool, you are a Trump voter. Shut the fuck up.
So that the whole show, again, it's on YouTube. It's pretty entertaining. This episode has some very interesting conversations among different classes of Black people. And one of the, I wouldn't say funny parts, is Robert Guillaume's character, Benson. His character, he has a light-skinned wife that is too light to go. So her character is constantly tanning. Because she doesn't want to have to leave her family. So every scene she's trying to get dark.
It's a wild ass skit. They should I mean, it almost seems like the new Twilight Zone, right? Like, how like some of the stuff that Peele was doing with the new Twilight Zone, which I liked, even though I thought it was like a third totally badass and like a third of it's like, yes, I agree with that viewpoint. and like a third of us like, that was fine.
I saw maybe 3 or 4 episodes of it, and from the ones I saw were pretty interesting. The first one I thought was really good with the comedian.
Yeah, that was one of the best ones. That one was badass.
That was really good. The cast was great. Everything was great. I would like to see him take a shot at doing this, but I think because he's got Twilight Zone, it's like, why do an even funkier one? Which is like, we make the Twilight Zone funky. Here's George Clinton.
Twilight Zone, but funky.
He's Rod Serling in this. So every episode starts off with a floating
George Clinton. Really? God damn. All right.
So yeah, watch the show. Thank you guys once again for coming on, and we are out.
Peace.